Every moment captures crucial evidence. Every inquiry demands total transparency. Mastering your legal rights, achieving lasting justice.
Ma'am, we need proof of citizenship immediately.
I'm American, born here, just like my parents and grandparents. What's your probable cause? Why are you asking?
We don't need probable cause. Just show your papers now.
Why are you wearing masks? Just let her go!
Ma'am, we need proof of citizenship immediately. I'm American, born here, just like my parents and grandparents. What's your probable cause? We don't need probable cause. This is routine enforcement, papers. Now, you want proof? Okay. But you're about to learn why you shouldn't hide behind masks when bullying the wrong person. The parking lot of the Kroger supermarket in Dallas was thick with humidity when they approached her. 11:45 a.m. on a Wednesday morning. Heat shimmering off the asphalt in visible waves, the air sticky and oppressive, the temperature already climbing to 95 degrees. Joan Winters had just finished loading bags of fresh produce and snacks into the back of her minivan, groceries meant for her children's lunch waiting at home. 38 years old, wearing a simple floral sundress and well-worn sneakers, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Nothing about her appearance suggested the quiet resilience beneath, except perhaps the deliberate economy of her movements. That particular efficiency that comes from years of managing grief and bureaucracy alone. She was reaching for the driver's door when she heard footsteps behind her, multiple sets, moving with coordinated purpose. 3 federal agents in dark tactical gear, faces completely concealed behind black balaclavas. They were part of an ICE enforcement sweep operating under broad directives to question individuals in high-traffic commercial areas, targeting what their operational briefing described as suspected undocumented immigrants. Whether that authorization was constitutionally sound or simply provided cover for profiling would later become a central question in federal court. The parking lot security camera mounted on a pole near the store entrance captured everything with crystalline clarity. The midday sun was bright enough that shadows pooled dark and sharp beneath the vehicles. Perfect visibility. The timestamp read 11 hours, 45 minutes, and 41 seconds. The lead agent was Robert Coster, broad-shouldered and moving like someone accustomed to immediate compliance, flanked by agents Daniel Nally and Parker Boyd, all 3 wearing body cameras already recording. All 3 assuming this would be standard procedure. Stop, demand papers. Process. Done. They had no idea they were approaching the widow of a United States soldier killed in action in the Middle East 3 years prior. A woman who'd spent those years navigating the labyrinth of military benefits, survivor claims, and government forms. A woman who'd taught herself constitutional law out of necessity, who'd learned to read legal documents the way other people read recipes, who'd become fluent in the language of rights and procedures because the alternative was being swallowed by a system that forgot families like hers the moment the flag was folded. They had no idea she was already 3 steps ahead. If you are ready to see institutional racism taken down, like this video and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. And if this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button right now because you won't want to miss tomorrow's story of cops messing with the wrong people and finding out. Let's continue. Ma'am, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Coster called out, his voice muffled but aggressive through the balaclava, his hand resting near the equipment on his belt. We need to see your identification and proof of citizenship. Joan turned slowly, deliberately, her hands remaining visible at her sides. The camera captured her face in profile, calm, evaluating, no panic visible. She took in the 3 masked figures, their badges barely visible beneath tactical vests, their faces entirely hidden. On what basis? Her voice was steady, measured, almost conversational. What probable cause do you have to stop me? Coster stepped closer, his boots loud on the pavement. Nally and Boyd spread to the sides, forming a containment formation, blocking her path to the driver's door. 3 trained agents surrounding a woman holding grocery bags. This is a routine enforcement action. We're conducting checks in this area. You need to provide documentation now. Joan set down the last bag carefully, then straightened. I'm an American citizen. My family has been here for generations. Unless you have specific, articulable suspicion that I've committed a crime, you have no legal authority to demand my papers. The temperature seemed to rise another degree. The parking lot was beginning to fill with midday shoppers, a few slowing as they noticed the confrontation, though most continued past, heads down, unwilling to engage. "Ma'am, we have every right. This is federal authority. You're required to comply." Joan's mind was already working through the encounter with the precision she'd developed over 3 years of fighting bureaucratic battles, Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable search and seizure, Terry stops requiring reasonable suspicion. The legal framework was clear, even if these masked men chose to ignore it. "I'm uncomfortable providing identification to masked individuals who haven't properly identified themselves. You're asking me to hand over personal information to people whose faces I can't see? That's not reasonable, and it's not legal." Coster's body language shifted, his shoulders squaring, his stance widening. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Joan reached into her purse slowly, visibly, and pulled out her phone. She activated the recording function, held it up so the screen was visible. "I'm recording this interaction, for my safety and yours." "Put that away. Stop recording and show us your papers. I'm invoking my Fourth Amendment right against unreasonable seizure. I'm asking you to articulate the specific suspicion that justifies this stop. I'm a citizen, I'm not required to carry proof of citizenship, and you haven't identified any crime." Around them, a small cluster of witnesses had begun to gather, phones emerging, other cameras now capturing the scene. The parking lot was transforming from a routine location into a stage, visibility replacing anonymity. Joan thought of her children at home, waiting for lunch. She thought of her husband, who died believing he was protecting freedoms that these masked men were now violating. "Ma'am, final warning. Provide identification or you will be detained." Joan kept her voice level. "I want to speak with your supervisor. I want your names and badge numbers. And I'm calling my attorney." She navigated her phone screen with practiced efficiency, finding the contact she'd saved months ago. Elena Ramirez, Dallas Civil Liberties Union. The call connected. Joan tapped the speaker function. "Elena Ramirez." "Elena, this is Joan Winters. I'm in the Kroger parking lot on Lemon Avenue. 3 ICE agents in masks are demanding my papers without probable cause. I need you on record." "Joan, stay calm. Don't consent to any search." "Officers, this is Elena Ramirez, attorney at law. I'm recording this call. What is your specific, articulable suspicion for this stop?" The question hung in the humid air. Coster's jaw worked behind his mask. Nally shifted his weight, uneasy. The security camera captured all of it. "We don't need to justify routine enforcement." "That's incorrect. Under Terry v. Ohio, you absolutely need reasonable suspicion. What crime do you suspect my client of committing?" Silence. Then Coster moved. He grabbed Joan's arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. Joan felt the pressure, felt the deliberate application of force meant to intimidate. She didn't pull away, didn't resist, but she raised her voice. "I am not resisting. I am being physically seized without cause. This is being recorded." Coster produced handcuffs. He wrenched Joan's arm behind her back, the sudden motion sending pain through her shoulder. The cuffs clicked closed around her wrists, tight enough to leave immediate red marks on her brown skin. "This is unlawful detention. You are violating her Fourth Amendment rights. I am documenting this entire interaction." The growing crowd had their phones raised now, a dozen cameras capturing the scene. The security camera's timestamp read 11 hours, 53 minutes, 17 seconds. 8 minutes since the initial approach. "I am not resisting. I am complying under duress. These agents have not provided probable cause. I am a United States citizen. I am the widow of a soldier who died serving this country." That last part came out harder than she intended, emotion breaking through her careful control. Her husband had died in the Middle East, wearing a flag on his shoulder, and now she stood in an American parking lot, handcuffed by masked men, treated like the enemy he'd fought against. Coster gripped her arm again, began steering her toward an unmarked van parked 3 rows away. "We're taking you in for processing." Joan planted her feet. "Where? Where are you taking me? What facility? Under what charge?" The van's door stood open like a mouth. Joan anchored herself, her body becoming dead weight, her sneakers gripping the pavement. The handcuffs dug deeper into her wrists, metal against bone, but she kept her voice projecting outward, clear and unwavering. This is unlawful kidnapping. I am being forced into an unmarked vehicle, without charges, without Miranda rights, without due process. The crowd was swelling now. A woman in scrubs had her phone raised high. A man in a construction vest was narrating into his camera. The security camera captured all of it, the expanding circle of witnesses, the phones creating a web of accountability that couldn't be erased. Nally hung back slightly, his body language shifting. His weight kept transferring from foot to foot. And when he spoke, when he said, "Just get in the van and we'll sort this out at the facility," Joan's entire world tilted. She knew that voice. From 18 months ago, from a conference call about her husband's death benefits, from a military inquiry where a mid-level bureaucrat had explained why the friendly fire incident that killed her husband didn't qualify for certain survivor payments. The voice had been calm then, too, procedural, hiding behind policy language, while dismissing her questions about why the incident report had been amended twice, why witness statements had been redacted. Daniel Nally. She'd seen his name on email signatures, on departmental letterhead, on the documents that had tried to minimize her husband's death into an administrative footnote. He was here, in a mask, stopping her in a parking lot. The recognition flooded through her like ice water despite the 95-degree heat, but she kept it hidden, kept her face neutral. This wasn't random. She'd filed complaints about that inquiry, about the inconsistencies, and now one of the men involved was demanding her identification in a grocery store parking lot. Elena's voice cut through the phone speaker. "Officers, I have your badge numbers from this interaction. I am recording your refusal to articulate probable cause. If you transport my client, you will face immediate legal action for unlawful detention, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, and civil rights violations under Title 42, Section 1983. The elderly woman who'd been on her phone earlier called out, "I've called the news. Channel 8 is sending a crew." The dynamic shifted. What had been a routine enforcement action was becoming a public incident, documented from multiple angles, time-stamped and spreading across social media. The masks that had provided anonymity were now making them look like exactly what they were, faceless authority overreaching. Coster started pulling Joan toward the van again, his movements urgent. But Joan's feet stayed planted, her voice rising to reach every phone, every camera, every witness. "I do not consent. I am being abducted. I am an American citizen and the widow of a soldier killed in action." Nally flinched. The movement was small but visible. He knew she'd made the connection. Then Coster's radio crackled. "Coster, Ellis. What's your status?" "Sir, we have a subject refusing to provide documentation. We're transporting for processing." A pause. Radio static, filled with tension. "Are there cameras present?" Coster looked around at the crowd, at the phones, at the security camera. "Multiple, sir." Another pause. Longer this time. "Release her immediately. Return to the staging area. We'll discuss this in debrief." The words fell like a gavel. Coster's hands dropped from Joan's arms. Boyd stepped back. The momentum toward the van had stopped, reversed, the power dynamic shifting so suddenly that the crowd murmured with surprise. "Take off the handcuffs. Document her injuries. Provide your identification." The cuffs came off, leaving deep red marks circling Joan's wrists, the skin already beginning to purple. She brought her hands around slowly, rubbing at the marks, her fingers trembling now that the immediate danger had passed. "Your names and badge numbers. All three of you, and I want complaint forms." Finally, Coster recited his badge number. Boyd followed suit, and Nally, after a longer hesitation that everyone noticed, provided his as well. "Do you think masked agents should be required to identify themselves before demanding papers? Drop yes or no in the comments below. Or share this video if you've ever felt unseen in the face of authority." The agents retreated to their vehicle. The crowd began to disperse slowly, people approaching Joan to ask if she was okay, to share that they'd recorded everything. The elderly woman squeezed her hand. The construction worker gave her his card, said he'd testify if needed. Joan gathered her phone, her purse, checked her shopping bags. The chicken would need to be refrigerated soon. Her children would be hungry. She called Elena back, moved away from the crowd for privacy. I recognized one of them, Nally. He was involved in the inquiry about my husband's death, the friendly fire incident. That changes everything. That's not random profiling. That's targeted harassment, possibly retaliation for your complaints. The pieces were fitting together. They'd tried to bury her husband's death in paperwork. She pushed back, and now someone had decided to push back harder. I want to file a lawsuit. All of it. The stop, the detention, the excessive force, the retaliation, everything. I'll start the paperwork today. Joan, you did everything right. Joan looked down at her wrists, at the marks already darkening. Their mistake was thinking I'd forgotten how to fight. The lawsuit landed in federal court 3 weeks later. Joan Winters, individually, v. Robert Coster, Daniel Nally, Parker Boyd, and the United States of America. Civil rights violations, racial profiling, excessive force, Fourth Amendment violations, retaliation for protected speech. The government's first settlement offer, $75,000 in exchange for Joan's silence and a confidentiality agreement. Joan read through the terms with the careful attention she'd learned from years of military paperwork. No, this isn't about money. This is about them admitting what they did. The second offer at 90 days, $150,000. Still with the confidentiality clause. Joan's answer remained the same. The case moved toward trial. Discovery proved devastating for the defense. The parking lot security footage showed every moment of the 22-minute encounter. The agent's body camera footage captured their conversations before approaching Joan, the lack of any specific suspicion, their casual profiling. Elena's deposition of Supervisor Ellis revealed that the enforcement action had no operational justification beyond a broad directive to increase visible immigration enforcement regardless of actual suspicion. But the most damaging evidence came from Joan's own investigative work. Buried in her mountain of paperwork was proof that Daniel Nally had been copied on emails about her complaints, had participated in meetings where her persistence was described as problematic, had recommended that her benefit claims receive heightened scrutiny. The pattern was undeniable. A widow who wouldn't stop asking questions had been targeted by an agent who wanted her to stop asking. The trial began on a Tuesday morning in October. The Dallas federal courthouse packed with veterans advocacy groups, civil liberties organizations, and media. Joan sat at the plaintiff's table in a Navy suit, her wrists still bearing faint scars. The jury box held 12 citizens who would decide whether authority unchecked deserved consequences. Elena's opening statement was surgical. She walked the jury through the parking lot encounter minute by minute, playing the security footage, pausing at key moments. Joan, loading, groceries. 3 masked men approaching. The demand for papers. Joan's calm assertion of rights. The grab. The handcuffs. The crowd. The release. This is what happens when agents believe masks give them permission to treat citizens like suspects without cause. When someone decides that a black woman in a parking lot doesn't deserve the same constitutional protections as anyone else. When retaliation masquerades as routine enforcement. The defense argued qualified immunity, claimed the agents were following standard procedures, suggested that Joan's refusal to immediately comply had escalated the situation. But they had no answer for the videos. No explanation for why 3 grown men needed to handcuff a woman buying groceries for her children. No justification for why one of those men had been involved in disputes with that same woman over her dead husband's benefits. Joan testified for 6 hours over 2 days. She recounted the parking lot incident with the same calm precision she'd shown during the encounter itself. She talked about her husband's service, his death, her years fighting for benefits that should have been automatic. And when Elena asked about recognizing Nally's voice, her testimony shifted from procedural to profound. I realized that this was what they wanted all along. To remind me that I'm powerless. That asking questions about my husband's death made me a problem to be solved. That stopping me in a parking lot, handcuffing me, humiliating me in front of witnesses was meant to teach me my place. She paused, looking at the jury. But my place is here, in this courtroom, making them answer for what they did. Supervisor Ellis testified as a hostile witness, admitting that the agents had no specific intelligence about Joan, no reason to believe she was undocumented, no probable cause for the stop beyond being in a parking lot while appearing to fit a broad demographic profile. The defense's qualified immunity argument crumbled during expert testimony on ICE training materials, which explicitly prohibited stops without reasonable suspicion, required clear identification before demanding papers, and forbade the kind of masked, aggressive approach the agents had employed. The connection between Nally and Joan's prior complaints became the trial's turning point. Elena introduced emails showing that Nally had been briefed on Joan's Freedom of Information Act requests, had participated in discussions about how to manage her persistence, had been present at meetings where her complaints were dismissed as baseless. When confronted with this evidence, Nally took the Fifth Amendment, refusing to testify. The defense rested without calling Koster or Boyd to testify. Closing arguments took place on a Friday afternoon. The jury watched the videos play one final time, Joan asserting her rights calmly and clearly. 3 masked men ignoring those rights. Handcuffs closing around a widow's wrists. A crowd gathering because something fundamentally wrong was happening in broad daylight. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They returned with a unanimous verdict on all counts. Fourth Amendment violations, liable. Excessive force, liable. Racial profiling, liable. Retaliation for protected speech, liable. The courtroom erupted in applause. Joan sat quietly, tears running silently down her face, vindication arriving in the form of 12 strangers who'd seen the truth and refused to look away. The damages phase took another week. Experts testified about the economic value of constitutional rights, about the deterrent effect needed to prevent future violations, about the particular harm done to military families when the government that asked for their sacrifice then betrayed their survivors. The jury awarded $4 million. The number hit the courtroom like thunder. Even Elena looked stunned. Joan closed her eyes, breathing slowly, processing a sum that represented not just compensation but a statement, a declaration that what had happened to her mattered enormously. The consequences unfolded rapidly. Robert Koster was terminated within 2 weeks. Daniel Nally resigned before he could be fired, triggering internal investigations into whether other complainants had been targeted. Parker Boyd was reassigned to desk duties pending retraining. The ICE Dallas field office underwent comprehensive review. Policies were revised to prohibit masked enforcement actions except in specific tactical situations, to require supervisory approval before any citizenship demand, to mandate clear identification before any interaction. The parking lot footage became required viewing for new agents. Joan took a portion of the award and founded the Military Widows' Rights Fund, a nonprofit providing legal assistance to families of fallen service members navigating benefit claims, facing bureaucratic retaliation, or encountering institutional indifference. She hired 2 staff attorneys, established a hotline, created educational materials. The parking lot videos became training tools for civilians learning to assert Fourth Amendment protections. She became a sought-after speaker at veterans organizations, civil liberties conferences, and community forums. Her story resonated beyond the specifics of immigration enforcement, touching the broader truth that authority unchecked eventually targets everyone, that masks enable abuses that visibility prevents, that the forgotten and underestimated often possess strength forged in fires that comfortable authority never experiences. Within 18 months, the fund had assisted 200 families, prevented 4 dozen benefit denials, and successfully sued 3 different agencies for retaliation against widows who dared to question official narratives about their husbands' deaths. 3 years after the parking lot encounter, on the anniversary of the verdict, Joan stood at a podium in Dallas addressing a gathering of military families and civil rights advocates. Behind her, a screen showed a freeze frame from the security footage. Her face calm, her hands visible, 3 masked figures surrounding her. They thought I was powerless. They thought being a widow, being black, being alone in a parking lot with groceries made me someone they could intimidate into silence. They thought masks gave them permission to ignore my rights and that I'd be too scared or too tired or too forgotten to fight back. She paused, looking out at faces that understood grief and bureaucracy and the particular exhaustion of fighting systems designed to wear people down. They were wrong. And now they're training new agents using footage of exactly how wrong they were. That's not revenge. That's accountability. That's what happens when the underestimated refuse to stay that way. The applause was long and genuine. Later, Joan returned to her minivan, this time without incident, without masked figures approaching, without the spike of adrenaline that had become automatic in such spaces. She loaded her bags, started the engine, and drove home to her children. The scars on her wrists had faded to thin white lines, visible only if you looked closely, which Joan sometimes did. Reminders that strength often came from surviving what should never have happened, that justice wasn't automatic but required people willing to stand wherever power needed, witnesses who refused to look away. She'd been forgotten once, dismissed as an inconvenient widow asking uncomfortable questions. Now she was unforgettable, her name attached to precedent-setting case law, her organization helping families that systems hoped to ignore, her story teaching agents that masks couldn't hide misconduct when cameras were everywhere and citizens knew their rights. Joan Winters had learned to fight bureaucracy one form at a time after her husband's death. Then she'd learned to fight injustice, one constitutional violation at a time in a parking lot. And finally, she'd learned to fight for others, turning her $4 million verdict and her hard-won knowledge into a legacy that honored her husband's sacrifice by ensuring his family and families like theirs would never again be treated as forgotten, expendable, or powerless. The grocery bags were loaded, the children waited at home, and the widow, who'd stood her ground in the heat and humidity of a Dallas parking lot, drove toward an evening where dinner would be on time, where rights were real, and where justice, however delayed, had finally learned her name.
If you like this video, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next story. Share this video with someone who would appreciate it, and let's keep building this community together. And before you go, drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what stood out to you the most. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and I'll see you in the next.
Seeking truth is a collective journey, and factual knowledge is your armor. Thank you for viewing and supporting Global Accountability.